And just like that, NaNoWriMo is over. Did you win? I hope so. But if not, that's okay. Be proud of those words that you got down regardless, because that's still more than you would have if you hadn't attempted NaNoWriMo, and that's a really great thing. So give yourself a big pat on the back. Well deserved. That's very cool. So I am pretty pleased that I did manage to actually hit my goal of 50K about a week early. That was a huge relief, given this has been a lot more challenging for me than usual. Usually I reach 50K a little faster. So I was a little nervous I might not actually make it for a little while there, but I did, so I'm happy about that. So what next? Well, after I complete a draft, the first thing I do is I leave it alone for at least a month. Occasionally, because of deadlines and timing, I don't actually have that luxury, but whenever I can, I give myself some space from those words. I find that really important. That distance allows me to see them with fresh eyes when I do my first read through and have to decide what needs revisions, what parts needs to be changed and cut and fixed and made better. It allows me the freedom to be a little bit more brutal and when I need to cut things or change things, and a little less attached to those words when they're not yet great. So that's what I find really helpful, is giving that space. Highly recommend you try that. Leave your book alone till the new year and try to relax a little bit this December. It's been a rough year for everybody, and I think we all deserve a little relaxing in December. Also, I will be taking a little hiatus in December from posting Scrivener tips, but I will be back in January, don't worry, with tips on how to use Scrivener for revisions, and while I revise my own NaNoWriMo novel. So stay tuned for that. And now on to this week's Scrivener walkthrough, which is all about exporting, aka getting your book out of Scrivener. All right, we're going to talk about how to export your book from Scrivener. So now that you've written your NaNoWriMo novel, at some point you are in fact going to want to get it out of Scrivener and either give it to beta readers, or if you're doing self-publishing, publish it as an EPUB file of some kind. And there's many ways to do that. Some powerful export features that can help you. So the first thing you want to do is go to compile. That will compile all your little scrivenings into one document, and that's this button here. Now if you see something like this, it looks like it's not actually having many options. That's because you just need to click this little down arrow. This will bring up many more options for you. If you look to right here, format as, this will give you a number of different ways that you can format your novel as preset. So if any of these fit with what you're trying to do, pick one of those and go with it. First I'm going to show you how to export this as standard manuscript. So I'm going to choose standard manuscript format and then tweak it a little bit here. Once you pick your type here, you're going to want to do two more things on this particular page before we get anywhere else. You're going to want to make sure that all of the scrivenings, little text files here that you want included, are in fact checked under include. I actually don't want that one because there's no text in that one. And if they need a page break before them, that you have a page break here. And these need that added. Otherwise, the text will all just run together. Then at the bottom here, click under Compile For, and there you can choose what file type. If you want to send it right to your printer, you can choose print. You can do a PDF, an RTF, Word doc, a web page if you wanted to, EPUB, Mobi, those are EPUB ebook files, a whole bunch of options. For now, we're going to go with a doc file. And so now we've chosen this. We're mostly finished with this page. There's a few different ways you can format it over here. Personally, I don't use many of these. I mostly use formatting. I check the footnotes and page settings. So let me just show you how this works. And transformations, actually, sometimes I do. But separators, if you want to do a custom text separator, this is where you would add that. For formatting, this is the most important part. Definitely the most important part. This is where you choose to not have it be Courier. Scrivener does hail from the time of when it was initially a screenwriting tool, so it still does have Courier, which is a little frustrating, but it's easy to change. And you can also, once you've changed this once, you can save it as a preset so that you don't have to do it again. You can just choose that preset from the drop-down menu. So what you'll want to do is go through each of these levels and change it. Now for me, one thing that I do, each of these says what they include. So the title and the text. So the title is the title here. and the text is what's inside the scrivening. They also do include chapter 1, etc. as by default. So I like to take some of those out sometimes. So I usually will actually remove the title part here. And when I go to the section layout, I'll take this out here. And that removes part of the title. Just make sure it doesn't come through. Otherwise, you have multiple chapter 1, chapter 1, chapter 1 multiple times. But definitely go through and make sure anything here that's included here is in Times New Roman or whatever font you prefer. To change it, just select the text. Basically, clicking on it will select it. Go here to change the font and type in Times New Roman. That's what I personally like. All right, so now you've got these 3 levels here of formatting, and then you go to transformations. I usually uncheck these. I personally don't find them very helpful, but some people do. I usually uncheck these to make sure they aren't doing these things. The ones I do check, however, are remove highlighting, text color, because occasionally I will, while I'm revising, I will highlight things, or if I'm in the middle of drafting a nano novel, I may put like a certain color depending on if I still need to add more words here. Usually yellow is for cutting and green is for add more stuff. But if I'm just exporting it, I don't really want to have that in there, especially if I'm sending it to somebody. So I always remove that part just to be safe. Replacements, you could add replacements for words. I personally have never found a use for this. I'm sure somebody has, and if you have one, this is where you would do it. The footnotes and comments, I usually remove the footnotes and the inspector comments and inline annotations, just because I don't necessarily need people to have my thoughts embedded in the document either, especially if I am sending it to my agent or an editor. And then finally, the page settings. This is where you will set your default settings here. Usually it defaults to 1 inch on all sides, letter format, portrait orientation. If you have a title page, you can say not on page 1. Since I'm not using a title page for this one right now, I'm going to uncheck that. And this is where it'll either default to pulling this information in like this, or you can change it if you want. I always like to type it in personally, and then leave the page number thing there, just so it looks exactly as I want it to. They don't have to. And then this is where you'll change the font of the header and footer if you have one. I don't usually use the footer personally. I like to keep them all in the header. That's normally how standard manuscript format goes too. All right, so now you have your settings all squared away. I usually like to check the contents page one more time just to make sure I do have everything included, and then click compile. And now you can save it. And I already saved one here, so I'll show you that in a second, and that's where it will export to. All right. And show you what it looks like. All right. So now it says chapter 1 has my book right here. Now it's got the header just like I wanted it. Perfect. So now another way you can export is if you want to export an EPUB file. This is what I do actually when I'm revising, is I like to export as an EPUB. I have an e-reader and I will proofread my books on an e-reader. I find this really helpful in tricking my eyes to see this in a different way. I think recently has been something going around about people changing their manuscript to Comic Sans because it makes them look at it differently. And this is kind of a similar thing without the horror of Comic Sans. Though you could put it in Comic Sans if you wanted to. I don't recommend that, but that's totally up to you. So what you'll do if you want to do that is go to Format As and choose ebook. And normally it will default to EPUB. If you have a Kindle, you could do Mobi. I believe this requires additional software called Kindle Gen. I don't personally have that because I do not have a Kindle, but that's something to look into if you do decide to do that. If you have an iPad, it should take either of those formats as well as a PDF. So those are options as too. So if you, again, check your contents, make sure that all looks as it should. And then we see here something new popped up, which is the cover. And if I am working on a story that is going to be published or has a contract and happens to have a cover image, I will usually add that in here just because I like to have it there. It makes it feel, fun and final and like a real book. Or if you happen to be, self-publishing and you've made a cover or have someone create a cover for you, this is where you could add that in. Or you could just put in a picture that reminds you of your book. This book is in the very, very early stages. So I'm going to put a little picture that makes me think of my Wind Girl heroine. Now, go to formatting. And for an ebook, usually I leave this alone because I've found their custom formatting actually works really well. It's pretty standard formatting. It's the right font and everything, has the right spacing. So I usually leave that alone. Feel free to mess around with that in whatever way works best for you. I personally have found it to be pretty good, generally speaking. So, again, there's transformations if you want to. I always check that just to be sure. I don't put those in. And I remove the footnotes and the comments as well for my ebooks. And this is the metadata, and this looks a little different than the other one did because this is where you'll put in your book title, your name, a description. If you have a publisher, you can do that. The date, if you'd like to track the date. Custom unique identifier, if you'd like. Lots of things you can add here. I usually like to just add this in my way to make sure it looks exactly as I want it to. There we go. And then go right here and click compile. Here we have my Win book. And that will do the similar thing as it did before. It'll show you the look similar to what we showed on the Word document. And the last one I'm going to show you is a synopsis. And this is a handy dandy little thing that I discovered that's super helpful because who likes writing synopses? Nobody. Nobody likes writing synopses. They're brutal, they're boring, they're dry, they're not fun. But they're necessary. It's a necessary part of the publishing process. If you're going to a publisher and you're writing a series, they're going to want to know what that second book is about. So having a synopsis, you got to have it, even though it's not fun. So have to figure it out. But this can give you an easy way to export a synopsis. So click Synopsis Outline under Format As, and you're going to do a couple of different things here. One, we're going to make sure all our documents are included that we want. Then we're going to remove the page break before. And if we don't, it'll end up with each chapter synopsis on a new scene. And then we go to formatting. And what this does here is this has a synopsis checked, which means this part over here, all the text that's in each of these little note cards, will be exported along with the chapter title. Personally, I don't want to have the chapter title brought in with my synopsis. I just want the text. Your mileage may vary. Leave it as is if you like, but I'm going to remove these. So it's just the text of all these little note cards together. There you go. There's a lot of them. And then again here, it's the same setting. I don't really do much with this or any kind of header for a synopsis because I usually end up pasting it to the back of the manuscript anyway. And I don't usually have comments for this, so it should be fine. And again, change the compile for to doc and click compile. So I've got this synopsis here. Yes. All right. Here we go. Show you my synopsis. And here we are. So all the text from my note cards, all in one document, which provides the bare bones of a synopsis. Obviously, it needs a lot of revision, a lot of more fleshing out, but it's, a good chunk of the work done right there for you, which is really fantastically helpful. So that is how to export a document from Scrivener. I hope that I found it helpful, and I will see you back in January with some revision Scrivener tips.